The secret of the arch. Pace couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as she watched the researchers awkwardly dismount their ponies and approach the homestead. Jenny had taken over the role of hostess with grace, but the constant interruptions were beginning to wear on them both. They had agreed to share the arch with the scientific community, but the lack of privacy was starting to take its toll. The young researcher, barely more than a boy, looked at Pace and swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I hate to bother you, but we've discovered something quite peculiar in the cave beside the arch. It's something that doesn't quite make sense, and we were hoping you could shed some light on it." Pace felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her expression calm. "Of course, what have you found?" The boy handed her a piece of paper, his hand shaking. On it was a sketch of what appeared to be a metal plate, rusted but with visible etchings. Pace's heart began to race as she recognized the symbol for her ancestral tribe. This was not something they had shared with the researchers. It was a secret she had hoped would stay buried. "It's ancient," he continued, "and it seems to have some sort of mechanism attached to it. Could it be related to the arch?" Pace took a deep breath. "I don't know," she lied, her eyes scanning the drawing, searching for any clue as to what this might mean. "But I can take a look tomorrow if you don't mind waiting." Jenny looked at her, puzzled. "But why don't we go see it now?" Summary 1. Pace and Jenny are dealing with researchers who found a mysterious metal plate with ancient etchings in the cave beside the time loop arch. The plate bears Pace's ancestral symbol, which they've kept secret. Despite the urgency in the researchers' request, Pace calmly suggests viewing it the next day to maintain her composure and avoid raising suspicion. Pace felt a bead of sweat trickle down her forehead. She had to get rid of them before they found out what she had done. "I think it's best if we don't disturb the site. It might be delicate, and we wouldn't want to cause any damage." The young researcher nodded solemnly. "Yes, of course. We'll return tomorrow. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Venter." As they rode off, Pace felt a sense of dread wash over her. She had to find out what they had discovered and what it meant for her secret. That night, Pace couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, the soft snores of Jenny and little Isaac lulling the rest of the house into a peaceful silence. Her mind raced, trying to piece together what might have been found. Her ancestors had built the arches, not for tourists or researchers, but for their own purposes. They had been protectors of the land and guardians of its secrets. In the early morning, before the sun had fully risen, she slipped out of bed and dressed in her oldest, most worn-out clothes. She needed to get to the arch before anyone else did. As she stepped outside, the cool air was a stark contrast to the heat of the day before. She took a deep breath and started the climb up the hill, her heart racing. Summary 1. Pace, unable to sleep due to anxiety about the discovered metal plate, decides to visit the arch site secretly before the researchers return. She dresses in old clothes and leaves before dawn to investigate the cave and uncover the significance of the ancient artifact and its connection to her ancestry. When she reached the arch, she saw that the researchers had already set up camp. Panic gripped her. They had found something and she had to know what it was. She approached the cave, her steps silent on the crunching gravel. The flicker of a candle was all that illuminated the darkness within. The cave was smaller than she had remembered, and the air was stale. She could hear the distant rumble of the stampede, a reminder of the power that lay within the arch. As she moved deeper into the shadows, her eyes began to make out shapes and forms. There, in the center, was the metal plate, and next to it a pile of bones, human bones. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a scream. It was too late. She had been discovered. One of the researchers looked up, squinting in the dim candlelight. "Who's there?" Pace stepped into the light, her eyes still fixed on the bones. They were definitely human and definitely not ancient. The researcher scrambled to his feet, a look of alarm on his face. "Mrs. Venter, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice quaking. Pace took a deep breath and forced herself to sound calm. "I couldn't sleep. I had a feeling something was off. What have you found?" The researcher picked up the metal plate and handed it to her. It was heavier than she expected. The etchings on it were unmistakable. It was a map of the Arches, her family's legacy. Her heart felt like it was going to burst out of her chest. "We believe this may be a key to understanding how the Arches work, but we need your help to interpret it." Pace took the plate, her hands shaking. The map was a detailed layout of the Arches, with symbols she had never seen before. It was clear that her ancestors had left behind something much more complex than she had ever imagined. "Why are these bones here?" she asked, pointing to the pile. The researcher cleared his throat. "We think it's one of the first people. They must have been trying to repair or maintain the arch when something went wrong. It's a tragedy, but it could also be a clue to their technology, their way of life." The words hit her like a sledgehammer. If they had found a way to activate the Arches, it would mean that they could potentially send someone through. And if they figured out that it was her ancestors' power of love that fueled the Arches, they would know her secret. "We must keep this between us," she said, her voice firm. "I don't want any more people poking around here. This is my land, my family's legacy." The researcher nodded, his eyes wide. He could see the fierce protectiveness in hers. "Of course, Mrs. Venter. We understand the significance of what we've found. We'll be discreet." Pace turned to leave, the weight of the metal plate in her hands feeling like a burden. As she descended the hill, the first rays of sunlight began to peek over the horizon. She knew she had to find a way to protect the arch, to keep their secret safe from the prying eyes of outsiders. Back in the house, she slipped the plate into her pocket and went to the kitchen. She poured herself a cup of tea, her thoughts racing. She had to find a way to tell Jenny without revealing the truth. But how could she explain her connection to the arch without admitting what had happened to Isaac? As she sat at the kitchen table, her eyes fell on the portrait of her lost love. The lie she had been living felt heavier than ever. But she knew that she couldn't risk losing Jenny and her son, the only family she had left. The day passed in a blur of half-truths and evasive answers. The researchers were eager to share their findings, but Pace managed to keep them at bay, insisting that she needed time to think. Jenny was oblivious to the tension, focusing instead on the needs of their guests. As the sun set and the researchers packed up their gear, Pace found herself alone with Jenny for the first time that day. She took a deep breath and told her about the plate, leaving out the bones and the map. Jenny's eyes lit up with excitement. "This could change everything," she exclaimed. "We could finally understand what's going on with the Arches." Pace forced a smile, her heart feeling like it was being torn in two. She knew that the truth was inevitable, but for now, she had bought herself some time. Time to figure out how to protect the arch and her secret, all while keeping the love of her life by her side. The next day, she waited until Jenny was busy in the garden before slipping out to the arch. The researchers had left, but their footprints were still visible in the dust. She sat down in front of the arch, feeling the familiar thrum of power beneath her fingertips. The arch was more than just a window to the past. It was a bridge to her ancestors, a gateway to the very essence of who she was. Pace sat cross-legged, the metal plate lying in her lap. The etchings, once obscure, began to make sense to her. They whispered a story of love, sacrifice, and protection. The power of the Arches was not just in the hands of the first people. It was in the hearts of those who loved the land they were bound to protect. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She looked up to see a single rider, a man with a stern look, wearing the uniform of the local magistrate. Panic set in. Had someone reported the arch's malfunction? Did they suspect foul play? The magistrate dismounted, his eyes scanning the area. "Mrs. Venter," he called out, "I need to speak with you regarding your husband's disappearance 4 years ago." Pace's heart raced. She had hoped this day would never come. Standing up, she walked over to him, trying to keep her voice steady. "What is it, magistrate?" He pulled out a worn letter from his pocket. "This was found in the cave alongside the arch. It's addressed to you, but it's not in any language we recognize. We need your help to understand it, and perhaps shed light on Mr. Venter's whereabouts." The letter was indeed in her ancestors' script, a warning to all descendants about the arch's true nature. Pace felt a knot in her stomach. She had to protect her secret and her family. "It's a love note from a suitor before I met Jenny," she lied, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's of no consequence to you or your investigation." The magistrate looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. He handed her the letter and remounted his horse. "If you remember anything at all, please come find me." Once he was out of sight, Pace crumpled the letter in her fist. She knew she had to act quickly. If the researchers or the magistrate figured out the truth, it could mean the end of everything she had built with Jenny. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Pace studied the plate and the letter, trying to piece together what her ancestors had left behind. The arch's power was not just a myth. It was a reality that could be harnessed, but it came with a cost. With each passing moment, she felt the weight of her heritage pressing down on her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the veldt, she made her decision. She couldn't let the secret of the arches die with her. She needed to pass it on to someone she could trust, someone who would understand and protect it. Entering the nursery, she knelt beside her son's bed. Little Isaac's eyes were wide with curiosity. "Mama, tell me a story about the arches?" Pace took a deep breath. "Once upon a time, my love, there was a powerful magic that allowed people to see and experience the past. It was a gift from the first people, but it came with a price. To keep the magic safe, we must keep it a secret. Can you promise me that?" Isaac Jr. nodded solemnly. "I promise, Mama." With a heavy heart, she knew she had found her successor. It was time to teach him the truth and prepare him for the future. As she tucked him in, she whispered, "When you're older, I'll show you the arch and tell you all about it. But for now, let's keep it our little secret. Okay?" The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. Pace kissed his forehead and left the room, feeling the weight of her decision settle upon her. She had to find a way to keep the arch safe, to ensure that her son could one day claim his birthright without fear of repercussion. The researchers returned the next day, eager to explore the cave further. Pace greeted them with a forced smile, her mind racing with plans. As they set up camp, she slipped away, the metal plate and letter hidden in her pocket. In the quiet of the cave, she examined the plate once more. The symbols spun in her mind, whispering of a ceremony, a bond that would unlock the arch's true potential. It was a dangerous knowledge, but it was in her blood, and she knew she had to pass it on. As the researchers' voices grew louder, she made her decision. She would leave the plate and letter in the cave, where only her son could find them. Pace returned to the house, her mind racing. She had to keep the researchers and the magistrate away from the arch. She approached Jenny, her voice urgent. "There's something I need to tell you. Something about the arch." Jenny looked up from her gardening, her eyes filled with concern. What is it? Pace took a deep breath. I've learned that the arch is more than just a curiosity. It's part of us, part of our family. We need to protect it, keep it a secret from everyone else. Jenny's expression grew puzzled. What are you talking about? Pace took her hand, her eyes filled with desperation. The arch. It's our ancestral gift. We mustn't let anyone else control it, especially not those researchers. Jenny's eyes searched hers, and for a moment Pace thought she could see doubt. But then she nodded, her trust in Pace unwavering. Okay, I'll help you. But you have to tell me everything. Relief washed over Pace. With Jenny by her side, she felt stronger. Together they could guard the arch. They could keep their secret and protect their family. Days turned into weeks, and the researchers remained a constant presence on the farm. They spoke of their findings in hushed tones, their excitement palpable. Pace kept a careful watch over them, always ready to intervene if they grew too curious. The magistrate, however, had not returned. Perhaps he had accepted her story, or maybe he was just waiting for the right moment. One night, unable to sleep, Pace slipped out of the house and made her way to the arch. Under the cover of darkness, she approached the cave, her heart pounding in her chest. The plate was gone. Her stomach dropped and she spun around, her eyes searching the shadows. And then she saw it glinting in the moonlight. Someone had found it. She took a tentative step forward, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The figure grew clearer and she gasped. It was the magistrate, his eyes fixed on the plate. Panic surged through her. If he understood what it meant, their secret was out. She had to act fast. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice echoing in the stillness. The magistrate looked up, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Venter, I need to speak with you about your husband's disappearance." Pace stepped closer, her hand reaching for the plate. "You don't understand. This isn't what you think." He didn't move, his eyes never leaving hers. "I think I understand more than you know." The tension grew, the air thick with the scent of dust and fear. And then from the shadows, a voice she had hoped never to hear again. "Pace, what's going on?" It was Jenny, her eyes wide with fear. Pace had to think fast. "Jenny, this is about the arch. It's not safe for anyone to know about it. We have to trust each other." The magistrate held up the plate. "Is this what you're hiding?" Pace stepped in front of him, her eyes pleading. "Please don't tell anyone. It's for our own protection." The magistrate studied her for a long moment before speaking. "I won't say anything for now, but I need to know the truth. What really happened to your husband?" Pace felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The secret she had held so tightly was slipping away, threatening to expose everything she had built with Jenny. She looked into her friend's eyes, searching for an answer, a way out. Jenny took a step forward, her hand resting on Pace's shoulder. "We'll tell you," she said softly, "but you have to promise to leave us in peace. We're just trying to live our lives." The magistrate nodded, his eyes flicking between the two women. "Very well. But remember, I know where to find you if I need to." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Pace and Jenny alone under the arch.